Um, we're here with New Jersey families touched by the autism spectrum disorder to announce the introduction of the Autism Collaboration, Accountability, Research, Education, and Support Act, or Autism Cares Act of 2019. Today marks the start of a legislative effort that will require all of us, public officials, parents, self-advocates, service providers, to stand together and work together on behalf of all Americans with autism. With this legislation, it's our goal not only to preserve today's programs for another 5 years, but to strengthen them to meet our growing needs. For the very first time, I tried to do this 5 years ago when I reauthorized the autism legislation, and we had a bit of a challenge, and we succeeded, but I wanted to expand then the nature of a federal commitment to our fellow Americans in the autism spectrum. I wasn't able to succeed, but I am really happy to say that for the first time, this legislation ensures federal programs addresses the needs of Americans with autism across their lifetimes. And that language is actually going to be in the legislation. From cradle to the job force to career and beyond. When passed, this legislation will mark a leap forward in federal autism policy by recognizing this disorder as a lifelong challenge in need of a lifetime's worth of support. I'm excited to take on this fight. As the author of the Autism Cares Act of 2014, I successfully led the fight to expand and invest in autism research, detection, the development of new therapies, and community supports, including for young people aging into adulthood. Since then, I've worked alongside experts and advocates to solidify bipartisan support for Autism Cares so that we ensure that they're fully funded every year. These days, that bipartisan support is more essential than ever. Consider just last year when President Trump delivered a budget to Congress that proposed defunding autism care programs and slashing funding for research into developmental disorders at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. Fortunately, I was able to work in a bipartisan way to not only protect this funding, but increase it by $2 million to nearly $50 million during the appropriations process. It's my hope that working together with my Republican co-lead on this legislation, Senator Mike Enzi of Wyoming, we will continue this tradition of bipartisan support and successfully reauthorize this landmark law. I've made federal autism policy a top priority throughout my service in the United States Senate because I know the personal challenge this is to so many New Jersey families. Our state continues to have the highest rate of autism in the nation. According to the most recent data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, approximately 1 in nearly 60 children across America have autism spectrum disorder. But in New Jersey, the prevalence is nearly double that, with a rate of 1 in 34. While autism spectrum disorder is more frequently diagnosed in boys than girls, we've learned that autism has no racial or socioeconomic barriers, or boundaries, I should say. It's truly a spectrum disorder in the sense that every child, every student, every adult with autism faces their own unique challenges. Still, what unites all of these families is an overwhelming desire to see their loved ones with autism enjoy lives of dignity and independence. I can't tell you how many parents I've met over the years who lay awake in bed worrying what will happen to their kids when they grow out of school-based support, or what will come of their adult children on the spectrum when they are gone someday. And that whole challenge of that suddenly a date on a calendar ends up you have falling off a cliff because you've aged out of the traditional programs we have is just something that this legislation hopes to end. These hopes and dreams and fears have been at the forefront of my mind while drafting the Autism Cares Act of 2019. With autism's growing prevalence in New Jersey, we cannot afford to ignore this challenge. That's why it's so critical we prevail in expanding the focus of the federal government to helping Americans with autism thrive throughout their lives. This is about empowerment. This is about dignity, and it's also about compassion. This is about ensuring that everyone with intellectually and developmental disabilities are able to reach their God-given potential. So we go into this reauthorization effort clear-eyed about today's uncertain political environment, we know that we cannot take anything for granted. So let's today recommit to working together in the weeks and months ahead so that we can pass the Autism Cares Act of 2019 by Congress, get it signed into law by the President, and begin to expand the reach of what the federal government will do with our families of autism.